Good evening, everyone. My name is Tim Honey. I'm the president of the World Affairs Council of Maine, and along with the Maine Immigrant Rights Coalition, we have been sponsoring this series of 5 programs on celebrating immigration. And, okay, I will just get very close to the mic. That sounds good. Feels a little strange. Okay, my name is Tim Honey, President of the World Affairs Council of Maine. We've been running this series on celebrating immigration with our partner organization, the Maine Immigrant Rights Coalition. I'm going to be serving as the MC for tonight's program. We're starting a little late, so we're going to try to move right along as quickly as we can. And I want to first thank our guitarist, Gypsy Lumamemo. Gypsy, thank you very, very much. Gypsy is from the Congo. He's been in this country for 3 years and in Portland for the last 2 years. And I think he has found the experience here in Portland to be a good one. Welcome. Thank you. I would now want to thank our sponsors who have made this series possible. And I'm going to start with our premier sponsors who have sponsored all of the events, including tonight's, and the City of Portland's Development Corporation, the Sam L. Cohen Foundation, and Barber Foods, Advanced Pierre Foods. Let's give them a round of applause. Many of you have attended the 4 previous, or some of the 4 previous events, and we had sponsors for each of those events. So our event sponsors, I want to recognize them: Androscoggin Bank, Avesta Housing, DeMillo's on the Water, Landis, Arn and Janes, PA, Preddy Flaherty, H.M. Payson, Bernstein Shore, University of Southern Maine, and United Way of Greater Portland. So let's give them a round of applause. And for the sponsor of tonight's program, we have Lamy Willingham Shoes. And is Jim Willingham here? Okay. We also have Hub Furniture and Sam Novick, who is Sam, please stand up, sponsor of tonight's event. From Hub, president of Hub Furniture. And I think many of you, like myself, enjoy going into Hub and having a unique shopping experience at a wonderful place in downtown Portland. I also want to thank the members of our advisory committee that met many times throughout the last 5 months and provided invaluable advice to us at the World Affairs and to Merck. So thank you, advisory committee. Their organizations are all listed within the report that you have received. And if you haven't received a report, get one before you leave. So I now want to welcome somebody who needs no introduction in our wonderful city of Portland, and that is our mayor, Michael Brennan. But I do want to say one thing about Michael, because he believes so deeply in the importance of immigration and doing really good strategic thinking and planning and then taking action around critical issues. And so, Michael, we welcome you and we thank you for your leadership, and please come to the mic and say a few words.
Well, Tim, thank you very much, and thanks to Amy and the World Affairs Council for having me here tonight, and I'm glad everybody else is here as well. You know, a couple of weeks ago, there was a rally in Congress Square and Monument Square that Elaine, Claude, and other people had a hand in organizing. And they had a roster of people who were speaking. And there were 7 or 8 people that were listed ahead of me. And all down the list, the people that they had 2 minutes, 3 minutes, 4 minutes, 5 minutes, and then they got to me and they said, brief. And so I went to Elaine and Claude, I said, how come everybody else gets 2 or 3 minutes and I get brief? And they said, well, if we tell you to be brief, we know you'll take 2 or 3 or 4 minutes anyway. So thank you, Tim, for not making me be brief, but giving me 4 or 5 minutes to be here. Last Wednesday and Thursday, I spent 2 days at the Harvard Business School. And Karen Mills, who is a former administrator of the Small Business Administration under the Obama administration, she's from Maine. Her husband was president of Bowdoin College, and she's a senior fellow at the Harvard Business School. And she invited 90 people from across the country to come spend 2 days at the Harvard Business School talking about growth and about shared prosperity. So last Thursday, I had lunch, and Eric Cantor was sitting next to me. Now, Eric Cantor, until last November, was a member of the House of Representatives and was the House Majority Leader as a Republican in the House of Representatives. Across the table from me was John Engler, who's a former Republican governor of Michigan. And sitting to my left was Kay Hagan, who was recently a U.S. Senator, a Democratic senator from North Carolina. So I was in the midst of this tremendous political diversity and discussion. And clearly we had differences in terms of what we believed about American politics and the future of the country. But all of us, everybody was there, all 90 people, agreed that it was important to look at ways to grow our communities and to create communities that were welcoming to people from other countries. And I was pleased to say that in the city of Portland, many of the things that we're trying to do and hoping to do were very compatible with that theme. And many people who were there were surprised at the diversity and the number of people from so many different countries that choose to live in the city of Portland. At the same time, I also had to explain to them that we're engaged in a lawsuit with the governor and that we were struggling with the legislature to make sure that we continue to be a welcoming community and that we continue to look at ways that we attract people not only from our country, but from other countries to live here in Portland. And when I look at this report engenders and captures all the things that we talked about last week at the Harvard Business School and the infrastructure that we need to develop here in the city of Portland and Greater Portland and in the state of Maine to make sure that we continue to be a city that is a welcoming committee and recognizing that there are still things that we can do around language acquisition, about skill development and workforce development in order to continue to attract people to be here. And you know, over the last 2.5 years, I have visited 45 local businesses here in Portland. And every one of them, or 85 to 90% of them, talk about the fact that their biggest struggle is workforce and finding people to live in the city to be part of their business. So I embrace the recommendations that are in this report. I look forward to working with the World Affairs Council and all the various partners to make sure that these recommendations become a reality, because I know by doing that, we will make sure that Portland continues to have a social and economic environment that is good for the city and good for people that choose to live here. So thank you very much, Tim, for this opportunity. And I welcome the opportunity to work with you and the World Affairs Council as we move forward.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor, and that was a great way to start off our Celebrating Immigration program tonight. The next person I'd like to introduce is John Shoes. John is the president of the Sam L. Cohen Foundation. It's a foundation which is focused upon the greater Portland area and is playing such a catalytic role in the infrastructure development of the nonprofit sector within the greater Portland area. The Cohen Foundation has been one of our premier sponsors, and we thank them very much, and I've asked John to come and say a few words.
Thank you. On behalf of the Cohen Foundation, I'd just like to thank you for this opportunity and to thank the representatives of the 20 organizations who served on the Celebrating Immigration Advisory Committee, and in particular the World Affairs Council and the Maine Immigrant Rights Coalition for a wonderful series of events and community conversations. This project has been very successful in bringing people together from different sectors of the community to begin an important conversation. Immigrants have played a fundamental role in building this state, and recent immigrants and tomorrow's immigrants will continue to help build Maine's economic future, especially when they are given a chance to succeed. As a community and as a state, we should be trying to make Maine an economically viable place to settle for everyone. We appreciate everyone's efforts and look forward to continuing the conversation and discussing the recommendations and call to action. Thanks very much.
Thank you, John, and we know that the Cohen Foundation will continue to provide leadership on this issue. Thank you very, very much. It's now my pleasure to introduce probably a gentleman that doesn't need an introduction, especially to those of you who have lived in Portland a long time, because there's one business that stepped up to the plate when the immigrant movement started about 25 years ago in Portland. And that institution, that business was Barber Foods. And we're so fortunate to have Barber Foods be one of our premier sponsors, and to have David Barber, who has participated in many, many of our sessions, has been a very active participant, to come and say a few words to all of you. David?
Good afternoon. What a great place. I love this. It's just awesome looking out over that ocean. Thank you, Tim, for inviting me to say a few words. And a special thanks to everybody in the room, especially those of the World Affairs Council, for making this initiative happen. So, 60 years ago, my father started Barber Beef Company right down the street, about a few blocks down the street. And we lived in that area right around Commercial Street for many, many years, up until 1976. So let's go back to that time. My dad had one employee, that's it. So finding people to fill slots wasn't a big issue, and immigration wasn't on the top of his mind. But we began to grow, and we kept growing and started growing faster and faster. So here we are now in the 60s and in the late 70s, and suddenly we really expanding, and we became, the need for more associates became readily apparent. At that time, the Vietnamese refugees were just beginning to come into the States, and through the Catholic Charities of Maine, another thank you out there, we began bringing those folks into our facility, into our plant over on St. John Street, where it still exists today. So, you talk about being from away, that was really far away for these folks that came to our country to find a new life and to begin a new venture. So we recognized early on that communication was our biggest single issue. And it was the biggest obstacle. You know, when you're running a plant with a couple hundred people in it, you know, the word duck can mean two different things. You know, do I duck or do I, you know, watch the duck go across the floor? It's you want to make sure people understand what you're saying. So that was a big deal. We began providing education programs, providing English as a second language courses, computer training, managerial training, and at one point we worked with USM to have some higher level courses taught both at our plant and on the campus of USM. My father was immensely proud of those that graduated from these programs. Not only did he teach some of the classes, but many of the people that got diplomas, Barber Foods diplomas, received them from my father, Gus. So as things grew, not only did we need more hands, but we needed more talent. And through these initiatives, we found many jewels in the population who spoke English as a second language. They became engineers, they became supervisors, they became process improvement specialists, to name a few, quickly rising up in the levels of the organization, taking on bigger and broader scope of managerial responsibilities. And when you watch some of these people, they are just impressive, helping us solve problems of the day that were critical to our ongoing success. Whenever I had the opportunity to learn about some of these folks, what they did in their own country, it was amazing. You know, the mere fact of what they had to overcome in their everyday lives and struggles to get here was impressive, and it pales in the relative insulated lives that we live in the States. So no matter what your political beliefs are on the issue of immigration, our experience is clear in just a few lessons. First of all, obviously, I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for my grandfather, Jack, Jack Caribbean, who immigrated from Armenia back in the 1910, 1912 area. He couldn't speak a lick of English, but somehow he managed to communicate to the folks at Ellis Island that he cut hair. So guess what our name became? Everybody with Armenian had IAN on the end of it, so he became Jack Caribbean. I mean, Jack Barbarian. So when my father was in his teens, he and my aunt, his older sister, convinced his father that the IAN really needed to come off the end of the word. And lucky for me, I don't think Barbarian Foods would have done really, really well in the marketplace. The next thing was to create a culture and make sure people understand what's happening. We had a few people in the early years that didn't like our new neighbors, and some were asked to leave, but most got it and embraced what these other people had to learn. We all learn from one another. My father had a story to tell. As a first-generation American, he saw firsthand how people from away were sometimes treated. He made a promise that someday, when, not if, it was when, he owned his own company, he'd make sure that others were treated with great respect. He told that story often to community, visitors, and of course our associates. The third is do what you can to plug our immigrant community into the community. Support their organizations, getting involved with local activities. Small things like supporting associate luncheons in the workplace brings people together right where they work. So in closing, I'm delighted to have played a small part in this initiative with the World Affairs Council and look forward to helping pave way for future actions in this regard. Thank you.
Thank you, David. And if your dad, if Gus was here today, he'd be very proud of his son. Very proud of him. Barber Foods, as you probably know, has become Advanced Pierre Foods, and their sponsorship has meant so much to this series of programs. Okay, it's my pleasure now to take you quickly through what came out of the first 4 sessions that we had and the essence of the report, and I hope everyone has received a copy of the report. If you don't have one, you can just put your hand up and we'll get you one. Okay, while people are keeping their hands up, don't take your hands down. Amy's getting them. I'm going to just tell you a little story. Look out the window here. I got to stay close to the mic. And you'll see, if you look out towards Peaks, right in front of Peaks is a little island called House Island. On House Island is an immigration center. And that was 100 years ago, 120 years ago, the Ellis Island of Portland. And that is the reason why we selected Ocean Gateway to have this celebration take place, because all of us have an opportunity to look back 100, 120 years and imagine the immigrants who came from that island into Portland, not speaking English, struggling day in and day out, and finding their way, and becoming leaders within our community within a few short generations. So when we started this back in January, and many of you were there on that cold night in January, we had three objectives for these series. Number one, we wanted to increase awareness of the strategic importance of immigration to the region's economic growth and prosperity. To try to take this issue and to think strategically about how we as a community need to respond. Secondly, we wanted to create a greater understanding about the importance of workplace diversity for all of us, for immigrants, for those of us who aren't immigrants. Workforce diversity is an extremely important issue in terms of economic prosperity. And we wanted to better understand some of the barriers facing immigrants in their quest for integration into the regional economy. And thirdly, we wanted to lay a foundation for an immigrant economic integration agenda for Greater Portland. And that is the call to action that comes out of this report. And I'd like to just take you briefly through the steps that got us here. First of all, we selected a process which we called the community dialogue process, because we genuinely wanted to hear from everyone who attended their ideas and their thoughts. And our commitment to all of you was that we would capture that information and we wouldn't lose it. And that is what we have done in this report. We had a rapporteur at each one of the sessions who took meticulous notes on what came out and the ideas that were put forward. And all of those ideas are found in this report. Now, the sessions verbatim are up on the internet at the World Affairs website, and they're really, really good. If you want to get further into it, you can just go to the website and see that the 4 sessions are posted there. So at the heart of this was this community dialogue. We had well over 500 participants in the first 4 programs participating in this dialogue. And one of the themes that we kept on coming back to over and over again was best practices. Portland and Greater Portland does not have to think about these issues in isolation. This is happening around the country. And one of the things we need to do in terms of our strategic thinking is capture the essence of those best practices. And again, that is reflected in the report. So, what did we learn? What did we learn from these first 4 sessions? First of all, we learned about complexity. We learned about that economic integration requires, if we're going to be successful with immigrant economic integration, it requires a holistic approach involving not only access to the labor markets, but access to English proficiency, access to education, access to technology, access to citizenship, and access to basic needs such as housing and health care. And we heard that loud and clear. You just simply can't take workforce diversity and say we're going to put 100% of our efforts into that, because the issues are much too complex, and that came out loud and clear. Secondly, we learned about the creative economy and the role that the creative economy plays in this, and the city has played a leadership role in taking the creative economy as one of our cornerstones. And what we've learned about Portland's creative economy is it offers new Mainers the opportunity to use their talents and cultural and heritage to engage in a very rapid way. The universal language of creativity, the universal language of creativity can foster integration and foster cultural diversity. We learned about many ongoing initiatives. There are so many positive integration-related initiatives that are already underway that we must build off. However, these initiatives need to be better understood, they need to be better coordinated and need to communicate with all of the stakeholders. But we certainly recognize that there are many really exciting initiatives that are already underway and hold great promise. We learned about the lack of timely data about our immigrant population. And I can't think of any other realm that involves public policy where we have such a paucity of current information. And we learned about this. We heard it came up in terms of ESL. How do you plan for the next year of ESL if you don't know how many people are here in the community needing ESL? How do you plan for the educational programs that will best meet the needs of the immigrants if you don't have good data? So we heard that. We also heard loud and clear that there is a need for action. There certainly was expressed a sense of frustration by many participants. They wanted to know, are you really listening to what we need? They wanted action and not words. And that's why we really hope that this report and this initiative will lead to the next steps in this action agenda. And we learned about the importance of the business community in all of this. The voices of the business community in the community dialogues were critically needed, but they were often hard to hear and to engage the business community. And that's why the presence of David with us today is so important, because he is a part of that business community. We need that business community to pick up the ball here and to help us run with these issues. We need leadership from the business community. So, out of the community dialogue and out of what we heard from the community dialogue and what we learned from all of you who participated in the community dialogue, is we heard that Portland and Greater Portland has 3 aspirations that relate to new Mainers in our immigrant communities. And we learned, and we've captured these as our collective aspirations, that Greater Portland aspires to be a welcoming community for all immigrants. Secondly, we learned, we heard, and we've pulled into this as a second collective aspiration, is Greater Portland aspires to be an opportunity community for immigrants. And finally, we learned, we heard, and we record now as one of our 3 aspirations, the Greater Portland aspires to be an empowering community for immigrants. And from these aspirations, we've taken these 3 aspirations And we have put forward a call for action around these three themes: a welcoming, an opportunity, an empowering community for immigrants. And in your report, we detail the call for action, and we do so in quite a bit of detail. And so I'm going to just highlight the major themes in terms of the call for action. But in your report, the ideas about how you implement and what you implement and what you take forward, we didn't lose anybody's thought or anybody's ideas. They are in the report and in the background information. So let me just identify 7 key priority areas. First, build and strengthen collaborative networks for immigrant integration. Secondly, promote and facilitate the integration of skilled immigrants into the labor market and into the creative economy. And we don't have to wait to do that because so many of the immigrants that are here have those skills with them. Thirdly, encourage and sustain startups for immigrant small businesses and entrepreneurs. Fourthly, invest in prosperity by investing in immigrants. Create initiatives with the business and entrepreneurial communities, educational institutions, and the creative economy. Number 5, strengthen the basics, including access to English proficiency, education, and an immigration process that provides a reasonable pathway to integration. 6, empower new Mainers to make their voices heard and to promote throughout our city and throughout our region cultural diversity. And 7th, embed immigrant integration into our public sector agendas. And that means working closely with the City of Portland. It means working closely with the region's Council of Governments. So what comes next? The World Affairs Council, our mission is one of education. We stepped a little outside of our realm in terms of the immigration series. We'd never run anything like this before, but we believed that this is such an important global issue that is impacting our community in a very, very positive way that we needed to put this on our agenda. But we are an educational organization. We are not an implementer. So we partnered with the Maine Immigrant Rights Coalition, which is the umbrella organization that represents many, many of the immigrant communities and have worked so hard on important public policy issues such as general assistance. And we've had such leadership from them in terms of the importance of this report and the next steps. And they have said that they are willing to step up to the plate and provide leadership, provided all of you that have an interest stay with us on this, that you don't say the job is done, because we haven't set priorities. That's the job of a strategic plan. We haven't moved towards taking those priorities and moving them through a public process, which is what leads ultimately to action. So we have a whole section of the report on this call to action, and that is the next step. And I am very, very pleased to introduce my colleague and dear friend who has worked so hard on this, Alan Nahamana. Alan is the executive director of the Maine Immigrant Rights Coalition, has done an outstanding job with them, and he will talk about the next steps that Merck wants to take with all of you to make sure that this action agenda can move forward. Alan.
Try to talk loudly. I know most of the Merck meetings, I'm blamed for not speaking loud enough. What to do. So thanks, Tim. Thanks to the World Affairs Council for partnering with the Maine Immigrant Rights Coalition on this important project. Thanks for you all who have participated or are here today in this series of events. The report that Tim just mentioned is the result of your input and your insightful contributions to the conversation around immigrant integration. It's a pleasure for me, on behalf of the Maine Immigrant Rights Coalition, which is a coalition of 33 member organizations, ranging from immigrant groups, advocacy groups, service providers, faith communities, and so on. We are proud to have been part of this event and of this project. The advisory committee that you have a list in your report, half of the members of the advisory committee are also members of Merck. So we are fully into this, and we have the pleasure to really endorse the report. So we're also honored to have been tasked by the advisory committee with the responsibility to engage different stakeholders in a more deep conversation on how we can implement the recommendations. Immigrant integration is a broad and multi-sectoral issue. It requires the input of many stakeholders. Merck will not be able to take on this endeavor by itself. There's a need to convene and set up a task force that will include policymakers, business community, immigrant groups, service providers, to work with the funding community to make sure we can set up the stage for immigrant integration in Maine. I'm happy when I hear Mayor Brennan, who is also running for Portland, being ready to talk more about it. We have already talked about it, and I really salute his leadership on this issue of immigrant integration, and you all who have contributed, the funding community who support this project. Merck is more than happy to be part of the next steps with all partners that are interested. Immigrant integration should be what we should spend most of our time doing, instead of spending most of our time doing fighting anti-immigrant policies in Augusta. We need to have the conversation away from welfare when we talk about immigrants, but instead talk about immigrants in terms of fellow community members, neighbors, and see them as a great opportunity that represent for our cities and our state. So thank you again for being here, and hopefully we meet again very soon to talk more on how we can implement the recommendations. Thank you all.
Thank you so much, Alon. And I'm going to ask on your behalf, just a show of hands, how many people are willing to put some time and effort into this next phase? Turn around, Alon. Both sides. That's incredible. Thank you. It's my pleasure now to introduce somebody who has been absolutely so critical to the success of this program. It's our executive director at the World Affairs Council of Maine, Amy Holland. Amy has worked tirelessly to produce these 5 wonderful sessions. She has worked tirelessly to produce this absolutely marvelous report with its focus on an actionable next steps. And we just need to give her a great round of thanks and applause. And Amy, come on up and say a few words to everybody.
Thank you. I'm sure you're not going to be distracted by the Nova Star coming in behind me at all. It's a nice backdrop. Well, I have the pleasure of saying many thank yous to all the people and organizations who helped make this possible. First off, Tim Honey, who had the original idea and really brought his vision to life with the Celebrating Immigration series. So thank you, Tim. And the other two members of our management team, Alana Himana and Clement Yambe from CFL. They worked with us very regularly. And the advisory committee, you have those listed in the back of your report. Those organizations provided support and advice along the way. And our sponsors, who Tim introduced early on. But now I want to mention two people without whom this would not have been possible, especially this. Stephanie Katsarillos, who is our rapporteur, who attended each event and listened. She has an amazing ability to listen, synthesized and wrote up each event in detail. And I really do encourage you to look on the website for those because she really makes them come to life. And if you weren't able to be there, you can really get a good feeling for what happened at those community dialogues. And then she helped us synthesize it and put it all together into this report. And the other person is Amy Koch-Grinden, who is our graphic designer. She came up with the original logo, and then she worked very hard with me to put together the report and make it so beautiful. So she's a very talented person with Polychrome Collective, and thank you. And I know some of you were asking, the report was published by Dale Rand Printing. So those were the people behind the scenes who really made this happen. Amy, would you stand up, please? This is Amy Grinden, designer extraordinaire, and Stephanie Katsarillos. Are you? I count them among my good friends now, so I'm very thankful. And then we have our volunteers, Diana Twombly, who's a student at the Muskie School. She's been our intern for, gosh, I think 8 or 9 months and has been a terrific help with this, and she's in the back. And Yvette Unazazi, who works in the office as our administrative assistant, has been tremendous keeping the office going. So thank you, Yvette. And most of all, thanks to all of you who came to the events and participated in the community dialogue and shared your ideas, and I hope you're proud of the report. And now I get to introduce the music and performances. We are going to have, let me make sure I get this right, Palanca Negra Gigante is a dance troupe who's going to perform right now once we get the music on. So if you would just stay in your seats for that, and then when they're done, we get to eat. Food is provided by Babylon Middle Eastern Restaurant and Palms Thai Taste. And while you're eating, you'll be able to enjoy Jepsi Lumemo again on guitar. So thank you all so much. Oh, one more announcement, sorry. Portland is celebrating World Refugee Day with a festival this coming Saturday. It's going to be at Deering Oaks Park on Saturday from 3 p.m. to 6 p.m. It's free admission. There's going to be entertainment, activities, and snacks, and that's the kickoff for a week of community events celebrating refugee awareness. So there are postcards back there. Keep an eye out for that. And also, please follow us on Facebook if you want to stay up to date. Thank you.
Good evening. Hi, everybody. So I'd like to present Grupo Palanca Negra Gigante. It's a group from Angola. The new comes to Maine right now, new immigrants. So the kids want to really people to enjoy, to see the way they're doing dance in Angola. So welcome, Grupo Palanca Negra.
coração tá em xerie. Pelo menos, ai, ai, mamá, vou pensar é gostosa, ai, ué. A vida é investimento, mana do Brasil, vem você toda vai arrebentar, fica, vai no ginásio, vai ficar saborosa, como a tia Dickney. Não vai conseguir fazer vídeo, mana, para com isso. Ai, tá bem bom. Faz ginásio, mana, faz ginásio, mana. Ai, tá bem colado. Não custa nada, mas tá rica, mana. Tá bem bom, tá crocante. Bem bom, tá crocante. Tá bem bom, tá crocante. Tá bem colado, tá suado. Tá crocante, tá bem colado, tá suado. Tá bem bom, tá bem bom, tá bem bom, tá bem bom. Tá crocante, tá suado. Tá bem colado, tá crocante, tá suado. Tá bem colado, tá bem bom. Mana, tô no cama da manhã, mana. Ei, tá bem bom, tá bem bom, tá bem bom. Tá crocante, tá suado. Esse é pra todas as boas. Ai, colegas, pensando que um coração já num boneco, né? Nunca, boneco. Esse é mais outra. Vida louca, ai, vida louca. A dupla empanada, infantil. E disse também não dá. E disse que não pega. Só que nosso feitiço tá marcado. Vamos